On today's webinar, Revenue Models, Pricing and Forecasting, as part of our Youth Investment Readiness Program training series, we have Richard, who runs Ripple A social enterprise that creates ripples of social and environmental change. So what Ripple A does is transforms problems into self-sustaining business models in two thematic areas: urban economy and waste, and the labor market. They advise, but also invest as a partner in social enterprises in such areas. Richard has a background as partner of a large economic and research and consultancy firm and as management director of a 15-staff consultancy, supporting regions to attract foreign investment and create jobs. We look forward to hearing what you have to share today.
Okay, thanks for introducing me. And yeah, thank you all for joining me on this webinar. And yeah, before I start, I know how boring it can be to listen to one and the same voice for like 40 minutes while watching slides move by. So my intention for today is to make this quite an interactive session. And to get you involved, we are working through two of the solutions that were selected in the Youth Solutions Report. These are Night Relief and the Green Program. Now, due to time zone differences, I'm sure I'm afraid Sam can't join us, but Brady is there. Hi, Brady.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And yeah, these companies, Brady and Sam, have been so kind to share some background to their companies, and they shared with me some of the key questions that they are currently trying to answer in their own ventures. So let me encourage both these companies and all others listening in to interrupt, and either now or otherwise maybe via the YouTube channel where we will be recording this webinar. So what will be the topic for today? I imagine all of you have been exposed to stuff like value proposition, minimum viable product, lean canvassing and all that. And I know this can be confusing at times. So first of all, we will go over what a revenue model is and how it relates to some of the other terms that you've been introduced to in this webinar program so far. Then as soon as this is all clear, we will try and get a better understanding of why a revenue model is important and think through how each one of you could start setting your own pricing strategy. We will also do with a hockey stick shape of revenue can be both a good and a bad thing to do. Finally, we gradually work our way into getting you to do some homework for the next 2 weeks by developing your own revenue forecast. In developing the content of this webinar, I've made use of some of the links that you can find in the syllabus of the program, and I definitely recommend you to have a look at some of those because they are quite insightful, will further help you build understanding of revenue models. So in previous webinars, you worked on a minimum viable product, you did some lean canvassing, value proposition, etc. And today we speak about revenue models. But how do these actually relate? Let's go through this lean canvas that you see displayed here. And I'm sure you've seen these before. And if you didn't, just Google strategizer.com or Google lean canvas. And I think it's a great tool to develop your own full-blown business plan, basically summarized on one page. And it's a relatively straightforward sort of methodology to understand. Brady, maybe you can run us through this canvas for the Green Program. I'm now going to share my mouse with you. So if it's downloaded on your side, over to you.
Great, thank you, Richard. I think it's starting to share with me and I'll run through it. Okay. So the revenue model for the Green Program and our value proposition, I'll go through this pretty quickly so you get a better understanding, but our main value proposition is a unique short-term experiential educational program focused on the SDGs. And what that does is really accelerates the careers for young leaders. So that is our main value proposition, and that's what we've done for the past about 7 or 8 years. So through that, let's start with the customers. So we have a few different customer segments. The first customer segment and our main customer segment is the university student. And this is typically the university student that is interested in the SDGs or interested in working in a career that does more than just makes themselves money, but focuses on positively influencing their community and the world around them. These are the types of students we seek out through hundreds of universities around the world. And we engage with those customers and reach our value proposition to them in an intimate way. We focus in on account management and building a community. So it's a very intimate relationship we have with all of our clients and our customers, which reach about 75 countries around the world. We have about 3,500 alumni of our program and growing. So our customer relationship is actually also kind of our value proposition for us as well. So another section of our value proposition is our alumni community. Like I mentioned, it's about 3,500 alumni at this point, and these people are on the forefront of really trying to figure out their careers and how it ties towards the SDGs. These are young professionals. These are graduates, graduate students. Working all over the world in big corporations or starting their own businesses, but they have an underlying common theme of focusing their efforts towards the SDGs. So another customer we have with that value proposition is also kind of the corporate and business section, trying to get our alumni hired in companies that are also either eager to work on the SDGs or already doing so. And this is kind of the portion of our new growth strategy in which we're working with the investment readiness program and Richard and our mentor Ava on working on this and fleshing this new opportunity out for us. So our main customer segments are universities and university students, and now we're teasing something else out. So how we do that through the channels is definitely an online community. We have a website. We have an online portal. We have private groups that we use. So and social media, and then through our global programming. So we have a bunch of different channels. Obviously, nowadays you have to have the online platform, but focusing in on kind of that human-to-human connection is how we take it a step further through global events. And the revenue, we have a couple different revenue streams from that. Our main focus is a client pay us. That's direct revenue. We also have partnership opportunities with universities, so universities pay us. But what we're also working on with that other customer segment is figuring out ways in which we can leverage foundations and corporate social responsibility sections of companies and organizations to develop corporate programs and do different things. So we're trying to tease out a little bit more different revenue streams. But right now we're like Richard mentioned earlier, everybody seeks to have that hockey stick revenue growth, and we're more of that linear kind of slow growth, but it allowed us to test out a lot of different things without huge impact. So that's our revenue model. So next, we can head over to some of our maybe key activities or key resources. That might be a better option. Key resources is our community. The community we've built. We have a support system of universities around the world. We have a CRM, which is a key resource, a customer relation management system that we've built out from the ground up that operates for us. We have key resources and curriculum that we create. So that's some of our key resources, and then activities. This is kind of the fun stuff. This is the section of the value proposition canvas or the business model canvas where, how does things get done, right? So a lot of our day is spent on creating partnerships and through account management, sales and marketing. That's a daily thing for us, is what we have to do nonstop. Make sure that our opportunities are reaching the right clientele and the right people that are interested in these opportunities. Operations, right now we actually have programs running in Japan, Iceland, and Hawaii, and also Peru actually just started. So we're in operations mode during spring break. So all of our partners on the ground are doing all the logistics to make sure all of our clients are having a great time. About 100-some students abroad with us right now. And thought leadership. I myself and Melissa and a couple of other our partners do a lot of speaking at universities. Try to different types of ways at conferences to get our brand out there and to reach new type of opportunities. So that's a lot of our day-to-day activities. And we're based here in Philadelphia, in the East Coast of the United States, and we try to focus as far reach as the other side of the world to make sure that we're adjusting appropriately to market demands. Next section would definitely be our partners. We would not be anywhere without our partners. This is a very crucial step into understanding a business and your growth strategy. You have to have certain key partners that will get you to where you want to go or give you a good feedback loop to push you to be a better version of yourself. So we have key partnership with universities where they embedded our program into curriculum. They send groups of students on scholarship on our programs, and they do credit transfers. We have a network of supporters of about 10,000 university supporters. That is like faculty and deans and things that share our information and help us recruit the types of students we're looking for. We have ambassadors, which are alumni of ours that want to take it a step further in a leadership position. So they're on campuses, about 50 different campuses, and working to help us build curriculum and recruit students and also do fun sustainability related activities on campus to try to bring people together. Our logistical partners and university partners in the countries in which we operate are crucial. We wouldn't have programs working with them, and they're all local in country. And then, you know, a new partner model that we're working with that other customer segment is the HR departments of corporates, of corporate and private sector businesses, working with us directly to source talent from our alumni because they know extra skills that they get in our programs. So that's another section of the partnership. And then we also do have an advisors over the past 8 years, some advisors that have helped us through this journey, which are crucial. And then the last section, I think, for this business model campus, you know, is our costs. And we have a high cost in our operations season. That's all making sure that everybody's well paid in our universities, our university partners, our logistic partners, our operations team, which that is sales and marketing, is a high cost, but we find, being a young team, we find savvy ways to offset that cost. Through social media and free design platforms like canva.com and things, if anybody is interested in that. And just the labor is expensive. So, and then we also invest a lot within the countries in which we operate through service projects, offsetting our flight costs of the greenhouse gas emissions. You know, so we spend a lot of money in key times, but it allows us to make sure that we're growing in the right way. So yeah, I'm more than happy to chat with anybody about our model and how maybe you can get some learnings from us. And if anybody has any ideas, I'd love to share. My name is Brady with the Green Program, the Director of Strategy and Business Development. And thank you so much, Richard, for having me explain. If there's anything else you'd like me to share, please let me know.
Great, Brady. Thanks a lot for sharing this with us. And yeah, it's good to hear that you're so enthusiastic doing your key activities and you're actually having fun doing so while making this green program work. And it's also great to hear that you were actually acknowledging the importance of partners. They are sometimes neglected. So thanks a lot. And yeah, to the rest of the audience, as you can see, revenue is basically step 5 in the lean canvassing out of 9 steps. And how I basically see it, typically kind of figure out is you first need to kind of understand what your business model is, which are basically steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what is the value proposition that you offer and how do you actually create it? Then you go into the infrastructure that you need to implement to make sure that that value proposition is actually brought to your clients. So that's where you come into the key activities, partners, and key resources. Only once you have established that, then you should actually go down into how much is it going to cost. And that's also important for today. We're not covering costs. We're just looking at the revenues that we're going to generate. This is also kind of a nice bridge to the next slide. So how does the business model and the revenue model kind of fit into it, and how is a business model related to a revenue model? Now let's go to the next slide. And I hope I still am in control. There we go. So the green box is how a business model and a revenue model relate to each other. You see different chapters, but I come to that later. Your business model is basically a structure of how your business creates value for your clients and for your stakeholders. So who are we, what do we do, and why do we do that? And the success of your model is actually determined by the profit that you generate for the owners, the positive change that you create for your stakeholders and for your clients, but also the way the company is actually able to balance profits and change. That's basically the success of your business model. Your revenue model is the way how your business is actually able to capture the value that you generate from the business model into revenue streams. And that's basically how they relate to each other. Now, a final term to look at how it relates to the revenue plan is the term business plan. And a lot has been written and said about the business plan. And in my previous job as a consultant, the sheer notion of having to write a business plan if you had a new idea, then you had to kind of come up with a detailed spreadsheet full of purely theoretical versions of the financial future. And the fact that you would have to write a business plan in itself was already an obstacle to innovation. I think that was mainly due to the fact that this company was an established company with a very long and rich history. And established companies, in my view, typically implement known models. And that's the big difference with you guys. You're startups, you look for new models. So the bad news still is, do you need a business plan? I think yes, you do. The good news is you should actually start writing when you feel fit for it. So first establish your exact product market fit. Don't start theoretizing about potential revenue streams and costs, etc., etc. But first make sure you get your product fit to the market, that you have that done well. And to put it in a sort of theoretical mode, that's basically where the acquisition costs to acquire that client are actually lower than the longer term revenue you'll be able to capture from that client. But that is maybe a bit details into the lean canvassing. So first, know your product market fit. And then if you can then start writing your business plan, it's not a series of assumptions glued together, but it's actually, you can see it as your own execution document. And it's actually going to help you make sure that you boost your company. So plan before you actually start writing the plan. Once you start writing the plan, I see 5 key ingredients. I already mentioned who we are and what we do. Then of course you have your organization and staffing. What does the team look like? Who does what? What is your background? What's the sort of diversity that you have in your team? Marketing and sales, very important chapter. And then finances. Basically, I see finances, how much money do you bring in and at what costs? And how do you finance these costs? And apart, notwithstanding the fact that every single section here is important, I think finance, of course, is a key element of your business plan. Going back to that hockey stick model, it's a tricky sort of balancing act that you would need to try and arrive at. Because on the one hand, venture capital firms kind of would like to see that hockey stick shape of revenue generation, because then they are likely to get a nice return on their investment. At the same time, let's be realistic and let's make sure that you do a forecast that is maybe 12, 18 months, and you don't start quadrupling or whatever your revenue, because then you need to still basically be able to be reliable and to be having a proper estimate. So be sure to be careful about the hockey stick model. The tricky thing is that when you have determined how you create value for your stakeholders, do not think too lightly about how you will actually capture this value for your organization. Those are two different things. If your business model is not able to capture the value you're generating, then you'll actually be able not to sustain. So looking at revenues, let's go to that right end sort of box that says revenues, cost, and profit. A revenue model, as I said earlier, does not deal with the cost to the company. We're not talking profit here. So let me just quickly cross out this. Basically looking at a revenue model, the volumes of sales and the price of these sales. So P times Q. If that's the sort of formula that you remember after this webinar, it's probably the most important thing. Simply price times quantity. Prices can vary by time, by customer segment, by way of sales. And we come to this in a bit when we discuss how to think about pricing strategies. The quantity of sales, yeah, that's important to first determine what your exact product is that you're selling. Are you selling a license? Are you selling an app? Or are you providing the app for free and start maybe selling ads on that app? It's important to understand what you're selling. Then you start estimating how much of these products you will be able to sell at any given price in a given time period and under different scenarios. And we also come to that later when we start dealing with forecasting. So far, I think it's not overly complicated, but let's have a look at some real life examples and see how these companies actually play with the value they create and the way they capture this value and earn their money. And you'll see some interesting differences. So these are, well, most of these companies you probably know. Some of them are new, but let me first go to Amazon and Google. Amazon, basically, the business model that they have is e-commerce services, etc. But essentially, they create value to their customers from the data analysis that they create. They're not just a simple e-commerce company. The same applies to Google. Their business modeling, in its sense, in essence, is actually provide information, but they provide information for free. So you can see some essential customer segments of Google actually do not have to pay and pick up the bill. That's in this sense actually the advertising companies that are picking up the bill. A smart bio at the bottom of the sheet is actually a business I'm involved in myself, and we try to inspire people to stay agile and to better match employers with employees and with education, and to reduce the social security costs, improve labor market policy by city and region. We should use to enter our platform by providing free access, and then we add some premium services to enjoy participating. And eventually, we would hope in, let's say, year 3, year 4, we actually also start to look at advertisements. So different business model, different revenue models. I put Intel and Gore together here because, as you may know, they produce a specific device or a membrane for extreme weather clothing, but they don't sell it to the individual customers. They actually sell it to software producers or to hardware producers and to, let's say, the companies that actually produce the clothing. Yet another model, Philips Lighting. And yeah, the picture below, you will probably wonder what on earth is that? That is a shawarma robot. And in my mind, these companies both are onto a very interesting and sustainable format as they are shifting focus. Philips is currently looking to move from the product that they're selling, which is light bulbs and all sorts of different light devices, to the service that is actually provided. So that's actually provide light. So they shift focus from, let's call it the locus of the problem, which is light bulbs, to the problem space, which is light. The same applies to the shawarma robot. Imagine this is sold to a company that goes bust in 2 years. The shawarma robot ends up somewhere in a landfill, and there's a 30-year warranty on the Swiss engine that is still part of that robot. Now, there's clear interest for the manufacturer of this device to still be able to use the spare parts in other parts of robots that are actually still in place and that are functioning elsewhere. At the same time, they are now at the stage that they have been able to make a semi-automated robot and not yet a full automated robot. And this system will actually allow them to start selling not the equipment itself, but basically selling the service of each scan that robot would scan the meat. And the idea of that is that they would always be able to stay in touch with their customer, not on a one-time moment when they sell the equipment, but basically for a longer period of time. And I think that also brings me to the link between, let's say, Night Relief and Green Program. I think, Sam, if you're listening in afterwards, you played the recorded version of this webinar, maybe have a look if you can apply this idea of switching focus. So in short, are you selling pens, or are you trying to solve the problem that people cannot write? That's the sort of idea that I'm trying to make clear here. I think for nitrogen, start thinking of doing the latter. So think through if you can switch focus from the locus of the problem, which is the wrong use of nitrogen, to the problem space, which is in fact low rice yields, poverty, and the cost of applying nitrogen efficiently. If you kind of go through a thinking exercise, you may come up with different ways of generating revenue and capturing the value of the business model, which I think is quite impressive, by the way. Brady, you and I discussed over Skype earlier in terms of your new value proposition to the companies that would want to implement SDG activities in their entire organization. I think the message here is, think through how the accountancy sector, for example, could be picking up the bill of the value that you're creating for your clients, which are other companies that want to incorporate the sustainable development goals. Then those companies don't pay up the bill, but maybe the accountancy sector could be able to pick up the bill. That's just a sort of, summary of just a number of companies where the business model is one thing and the revenue model is actually something completely different. So you'll realize there's plenty of stuff to think through before you move from generating value to capturing that value. This nicely brings us to the next topic for today, and that is, why is a revenue model important? Okay. First of all, it's you. Your revenue model gives you a necessary understanding of your cash flow and your needs, your cash flow needs. And it's your way of demonstrating how you plan to earn revenue and maximize your profitability. This is important for you as an owner for the company, because you'll be able to answer questions like, do we have a profitable business? Do we generate enough cash to start paying ourselves a salary? Where do we incur cash flow shortages and how are we going to finance them? And even when do we expect to break even? So it's you, that's where it actually starts. But then the revenue model is also an important indicator of your company's DNA. Go back to the examples I used just now, how Philips Lighting tries to segment or basically service different customer segments by trying either selling light bulbs or light surfaces. And so the segmenting is actually quite an important way of, if you decide how your revenue model is going to be generating value for your company, it's part of your company's DNA. And how do you make your clients pay for your services? The model you actually select determines the type of clients you're going to attract. Look at Gore, that is actually now selling the membrane to clothing manufacturers and not to individuals. So at the very last stage, maybe not necessarily in order of importance, it's also important for your investors. It may be, well, I wouldn't say it's easy to attract investors, but as difficult it can be to attract investors, it's probably even more difficult to attract the right investors. When you pick development areas, you would want to pick those that are closest to the heart and mind and sort of vision of your investors. Finding a good potential investor is finding one that is in it for you and for the long haul, and not just to make a quick return on the investment. You would not want to find an investor that immediately starts controlling your business from the day that they take a stake. So reading from the same hymn sheet and really understanding that you have the same sort of company value and the way you earn your money is absolutely crucial in finding the right kind of investors. And that starts with having a clear understanding of how your revenue model should look like. This I will not go through, well, spend on not too much time spent on, but this is just a number of revenue sources that you can think of. And that could be simply a book or a usage fee, subscription fee to go to the gym, maybe the hourly rate of a plumber, the brokerage fee of a headhunter, or a banner on your YouTube channel, or the app that you're trying to develop and sell. So just have a look at it, and maybe you can think of another series of revenues, but I think it could be quite an exhaustive list of the source of revenue that you could think of. Looking from this list of sources, let's go to the next topic for today, and that's thinking about pricing strategies. Refer back to starting with a P times Q equation. As I said, remember that from the end of this webinar. You may find it difficult to determine the price of your product or service, especially if you haven't developed a prototype yet. And at the same time, it's absolutely crucial to look at the pricing strategy as soon as possible. There's actually a rather straightforward technique to determine your price, and it boils down to looking at the value the product will bring to your client. So understand how big a role the problem that you try to solve plays in the customer's life. And look at, for example, at Apple. The way they are able to make enormous net profits is because they are apparently bringing a lot of value, and not so much because the iPhone or the iPad that they're producing is costing so much money. So to start with, set a price zone. And the price zone actually has two sort of determinants. There's a floor price, which is equal to your variable costs. You wouldn't want to start producing and selling stuff if you even can't cover your variable cost. And the ceiling price is the maximum price you define for yourself by focusing on the value your clients will get from buying the product. Now, how do you do that? It's kind of a subjective exercise, I must say. There's clearly not a big mathematical calculation behind it. But look at the willingness to pay. As an example, again, with the Apple, we all pay big amounts of money, and we are willing to pay apparently a couple of $100 for an iPhone, and somehow you figure out if that's 600, 700, 900, or even more. You do that by doing customer interviews. And as I said, understand from your customer interviews, you don't necessarily already have to say, hey, I'm going to sell you this app, I'm not sure to pay. But if you try to understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve for them, we have customer interviews like what really hampers you in your daily rice harvesting, for example. And then you can also start assessing the kind of value that you would bring in if you provide a solution for them. And a third way of looking at your price is basically to look at what do your competitors do. What is a comparable product that generates a comparable value for the customers, and at what price is that product being sold? Maybe I should now quickly move to the next diagrams here. So just to visualize what I just said, you have the price zone, which is that, let's say, vertical line. You set your floor price, and you set your ceiling price. Anywhere below the floor price basically will render your company unprofitable. If your price is above the ceiling, customers will simply not buy your product, and the company will never lift off. So most offerings will be priced in a green category. And this is also where your competitors are. Once you've established that price, you can actually start looking at each price level, what is the level of the volume of sales that I will have at each price level. Once you've done that, for each price level, you basically multiply it with the quantity of sales, and then you actually arrive at your revenue. What I'll share with you now is a demand curve, and I realize this is probably not the most exciting thing in life you have seen so far, but I hope it will illustrate the method of 1, setting a price range, 2, estimate volumes of sales with prices along this range, and then 3, calculate the total revenue. So let's compare apples with pears here. You've set your floor and ceiling price on the vertical axis, and the line you see in this graph is the demand curve for 1 kilogram of apples. When you price it at 5, you expect to sell 50 kilos. And when you lower it to $1, you expect to sell 250 kilos of apples. All you then do is look at how much will I sell at $4. If you look at the table on the right-hand side, you'll notice it's 100 kilos of apples. If you go to a price of $3, scenario D will tell you that you're going to sell 150 kilograms of apples. And then you have point E, 200 kilos of apples at a price of $2. If you then multiply these volumes with the prices you set, you get the revenues anywhere between $250 and $450. So at which level, anyone please answer this to me, which level would you set your price? I think I would opt for D.
Yeah,
And why? The highest level of revenue achieved. For $3. Okay, I hear you saying that, but sorry, yeah, let me carry on. I think the line is a bit delayed, so you probably had the answer right, so there you go. Indeed, clearly from this, you see $3 per kilogram will render the highest total revenue of $450. Now, let's bring in the peers. Obviously, peers sell less than apples at a higher price, at least in this case. And lowering the price clearly boosts sales and actually makes sales of pears exceed apples, just below the $2 mark, as you can see. In this particular case, I will probably set the price of pears at $1 and generate $340 of revenue. So why do I show this? There's actually two reasons. First, you can compare this to the minimum viable product and the possible sources of revenue that we've just discussed, and the way you have defined the minimum viable product for your own company. Now, if you have different sources of revenue, you can actually use this example to see, are we going to opt for the apples rather than pears, as it yields higher revenues? And then it's actually an options analysis that you do along this line. At the same time, you could also treat this as, let's say, an assessment of the total revenue. Let's say you're a vegetable shop and you want to understand what the total revenue is going to be for a given period of time. And then you basically start adding up the $450 and the $340, and you end up with a combined $790 at any given time. So let's go back to the two examples. I think, Brady, as we discussed, you're looking at your new value proposition, and this could actually be the combined sales of the existing products that you have and the new value proposition that you're designing to companies. And I come to that later when we start actually detailing the assignment for this week, and I'll use your new value proposition also in that example. And for nitrogen, this could actually be the combined sales, Sam, for subscribing to the app, for example, or obtaining the data, or maybe ads that you place on the platform by nitrogen sellers. So that's why this type of visualizing the demand curve is useful. Any questions on this, maybe? Okay, let's carry on. Then we still go one level deeper then. We look at how prices impact sales. So if you're able to influence the price setting in your market, again, look at Apple, this would actually provide a new scale of opportunities to maximize the value you capture from your business model. Let's now look into the various options of fixed and dynamic pricing mechanisms. These examples I've actually borrowed from one of the links that we'll provide in the syllabus. So have a look if you want to understand more. But yeah, fixed pricing typically get set by the seller. For example, as you can see, list prices, no matter what, you never do any discounts. You just, any mattress that you want to buy or any bed that you're going to buy is going to cost an X amount of dollars, no matter when or where or how you buy it. Then Alibaba, for example, actually say the more you buy, the lower the price. Tesla says the more sort of options you get on your car, you have a higher price to pay, but it's still fixed. And then customer segment dependent pricing. For example, Spotify, you can actually get Spotify for students at a half price. Now, the bottom one is actually quite an interesting one, the dynamic pricing, especially if you make use of online technology that you currently have. And let's say the airline companies are a very good example of how they try to maximize capturing the value from dynamic pricing. You typically pay a lot more if you you catch a flight later, or if the number of days between your flight out and your return flight is limited, then you typically pay a premium. So there's different ways of pricing your different products that you're trying to sell. And if you want to understand more, like I said, have a look at the links that were provided. And being a startup with an innovative product, you typically have room, I would say, to influence price setting for the product. So I think it's quite important to understand these different pricing mechanisms and use this knowledge when determining your price strategy, and therefore also developing your revenue forecast. Maybe dynamic pricing is something for you, maybe fixed pricing, maybe a combination. We can come to that later when we do the assignment. Which actually brings me to the assignment right now, and we're going to develop your own revenue forecast. So just to recap again, it's basically P times Q. And first of all, identify the revenue streams as clearly as possible. Make use of the various sources of revenue streams that I showed you in a few slides earlier. Then set the price range for each source of revenue identified and make use of the methodology discussed. Decide whether you apply dynamic pricing or whether go for a fixed price setting. Specify the projected life cycle for each stream. For example, if you have an annual license for software, then be aware when you do the revenue price setting that some of the earlier licenses that were provided either need to be renewed or actually need to be removed from your revenue analysis. And then for each source of revenue, you start identifying your estimated sales volumes for any given price, as we did with the demand curve. Start calculating revenues, and there you go. You have your revenue model. Now, what I think is a step that we have discussed yet is the revenue model is another important tool to understand what are the key variables that your company depends on survival. The business critical assumptions will always, of course, impact on the revenues that you're estimating. And I think once you've estimated the number of scenarios, then identify the key variables in your mind that have the most impact on your revenues. Figure out what they are and figure out what they are most sensitive to. So let's say you want to boost sales because you're going to go on a discount just before the Christmas break, and for that you need a quite active social media campaign. Now, the success of that media campaign will completely determine the influence on the final revenues that you expect to generate. So you could do a separate sort of sensitivity analysis of what would happen to my overall revenue model if that social media campaign doesn't hit its KPIs that we were setting, or maybe sets only reaches half of the performance indicator that we had in mind. If you then compare it to the sort of cost ultimately that you have to carry out a social media campaign, you'll be able to see what the impact on the revenue and on the profitability is of whether or not your social media campaign is successful. So what I'm trying to do now, what I will do now is I'm just going to share with you, see if that works, the spreadsheet that we have designed, but first of all also the spreadsheet of the green program, as I just mentioned as well. So this is just a sheet that I've modified slightly, Brady, but you will notice, you'll recognize the sort of different value streams. So these are the sales to Iceland, Peru, and Hawaii. Then there is a program development and your new value proposition that you just mentioned for Japan, China, Fiji. You set different price levels. You have a new venture that you're looking at, and let's see what happens. So let me just copy this in. That's 400, 250, and 10. I just wanted to make you clear what I'm trying to say. So your Iceland sales, Peru sales, and Hawaii sales, they go with a theoretical value of $5,000 per trip. Now, looking at the fact that you've been doing this for a couple of years, let's say 6 or 7 years, you can relatively, with a bit of confidence, assume that you will sell 400, 250, and 10 sales of this first product. Compared to this being the apples in that example that I just shared. If you multiply it with the price of 5,000, you see you have a revenue forecast for the next couple of quarters for the different countries that you're selling the product to. I try to do the same for the new value proposition, and you see the first program for Japan has already been launched. That's gradually increasing from 17 sales to 65 to 100. Then China picks up in the next quarter. You assume that it's the same sort of growth pattern, although there's a bit of a dip in the quarter 4. That could be, for example, let's assume, I don't know, maybe there's going to be import restrictions or visa difficulties, and you know that's going to hamper your sales in quarter 4. And then you have Fiji, that is the latest, and then you have new program 4 and 5 that's only going to be picking up at the end of 2008. And there's a third product, that's probably the corporate value proposition on incorporating sustainable development goals. New venture, difficult to pick up on. So let's start with 1, 2, and 1 for the different products. I will not explain, but again, this could be the apples, this could be the pears, and this could be your fruit basket, you name it. So very high price. Interesting one for you to sell because it's probably at relatively low cost, highly profitable, but new. So anyway, you start with 1, 2, and 1 scholarship fund adds up to these revenues, and you can grow these over time. So you have 1, 2, 3 different product categories with different destinations, fixed prices, and there you go. You multiply. Let me make this a bit wider. So estimate 1, quarter 4 2017, you generate 3.4 million of revenue. That's how basically I think Brady is figuring out his annual or maybe even quarterly forecasting. So if we apply that to a kind of template that we could develop, and we do it like this. This is a template that you will be shared with by the guys at Adela to make you start looking at your new assignment. Develop your own revenue forecast for the next 18 months. And you're going to use the template that I'm going to go through now. So let's just copy these ones in because I just wanted to make you understand what I'm trying to do. This again are the apples, price and volumes of sales. As I said, P times Q. There's a number of scenarios. So let's just copy these ones in and see what happens. To be on values, otherwise the formulas go off. There you go. These are iPad sleeves, and for any given, you can actually opt for which scenario you're going to go. So for scenario 3, you will see the price is 50. Ooh, that's quite expensive for an iPad sleeve. Probably just only going to make 20 of those sales, which brings me to a total revenue of 1,000. And then let's see. Okay, I see 4,000 because when there's a bargain, I actually start selling 400. So what happens if I opt for scenario number 1? And so you see my monthly revenue starts to quadruple, and not even to say the cumulative revenue starts to become quite interesting as well. So that's a sort of scenario. I have a given product, I have an iPad sleeve in this case. What is the price that I would want to set for it? And how does it impact the quantity of sales, i.e. how does it impact my total revenue? Second category of product could be a software license. There's a fixed price. You actually don't work with any scenarios because you say, I'm just going to sell this for 80. But I know there's going to be fluctuations in sales. Could be seasonal fluctuations, could be Christmas, could be summer, whatever. So you just play around with the new licenses, 2023, and this line is the one that you can actually start using. The price you could also play around with. Let's say it's 50. And you have your monthly revenue and your cumulative revenue. And as I said earlier, be aware of setting a projected life cycle for each stream, because of course the 3 licenses that you sell in month 3 will expire, in month 1 will expire after month 12. So revenue wise, you just have to make sure that you deduct in the cumulative licenses. You have 366 licenses in month 12. You add 52 to them, but then deduct the number of sales that you had in month 1, because that has actually been expired. And the same applies to month 14, you have sold 37. That will bring the total number of licenses to, what is it, 452. But then you have to deduct the 20 of the expiring licenses in month 2, which gives you a number of 432 licenses, which again is the Q. Multiply with the price, you end up with a monthly revenue of 21,600. Then I still have a third product. Now it becomes interesting because you have dynamic pricing for the software license. You have continuous fluctuations in sales. You will realize it's going to be quite complicated to start filling out this box because there's too many variables to put it in a sort of 2D chart. So what you could do is basically, okay, look at the price first. I'm going to play around with my software license. And this is going to be $1, $3, $5, $4, $6. And based on the number of licenses, I will be able to start fluctuating as well. So price at 1, I sell 20. Price of 3, I sell 8. Yeah, I have a price of 8, I sell 1. And that's basically how you look at what's the impact of dynamic pricing. And is that actually a smart thing for me to apply when I start developing my revenues? So again, if this is the apples and pears combination, this could be the apples, your pears, and your fruit bowls. So you either look at, okay, I have one product. I mean, when you do your assignments for the couple of weeks, you have just one product. Then basically you just go for one of these 3 examples, and you have your cumulative revenues and your monthly revenue, and that's it. But if you're the vegetable shop that has a range of products with a range of prices and a range of different sort of price setting strategies, you could actually start using this as a accumulation of the products that you're selling, as I just showed in Brady's example. And you can actually start ending the revenues on a monthly basis altogether. Then you have your revenue prediction for the next 18 months on a monthly basis. Now this assignment will be shared with you, as I said, on the platform. It will come along with some explanation if it's still required, and then off you go. So that's it. I realized that I went through quite some material, and I hope I haven't overwhelmed you with information because there was a limited amount of time available. If there are any questions, then don't hesitate. Give me a shout. Also, when you have questions when you do the assignment for the next weeks, please don't hesitate to get in touch. You find my details at the bottom of this slide. And thank you for listening. I wish you all the best of luck with your social enterprise. Bye-bye.